Okay, so where we left off in chapter 9 is that we know Rick is at another one of Jake's Friday night bashes. When he first gets there, he encounters a college student from Throckmorton Hall and realizes that Jake has been earning money by illegally writing kids' college essays, which is a really, really, really big offense. But that's how Jake has been earning all his money. And now we see that there is another crazy party, which Todd and Dee Dee have arrived at and Jennifer's at, and it's already packed. So we are starting on page 103, the bottom paragraph. I tried to escape into the hall and found it jammed. The party was approaching critical mass. You couldn't have crammed another body in there without a shoehorn. Some guy was playing tonsil hockey with the captain of the girls' tennis team. Not far away, a gaggle of friends had formed a half circle and were spitting at the back of his neck. From what I could see, they had found the range. Foam dripped down the back of his shirt. He must have been clammy and miserable, but he never stopped for a breath, never gave an inch for fear of letting the girl get away. It was a standard issue for a Garrett bash, the kind of semi-funny, semi-moronic stuff that had been going on for weeks in this house. Yet there was something different and vaguely unpleasant about it tonight. I took a good look at the slack-jawed, laughing faces. I didn't know these guys. They weren't from F. Scott Fitzgerald High. Word of the parties had begun to travel around town, and crashers were beginning to show up. They weren't axe murderers or anything like that, but they seemed to pretty much be the same pinheads that Fitz was turning out, and their entertainment choices were no shallower than ours. But there was a particular ugliness about the strangers acting this way rather than kids from our own extended family. I noticed a lot of other unfamiliar faces around the house, and while they weren't doing anything different from our homegrown rubble, they filled me with a sense of unease. So nothing is happening that's any different than any of the other parties that Rick has gone to, but the fact that it's not people from his school is making him start to see how childish and stupid people from his school really do act, and how childish and stupid these people look acting that way. Hey, baby, Jake sidled up to me. His J. Crewness seemed to have restored after his wrestling match with quantum physics. Jennifer said Dee Dee was here. Why didn't you tell me? You seemed pretty stressed about that essay. That doesn't apply to Dee Dee. He was talking to me, but his eyes were scanning the room and beyond. Listen, Jake, I said, did you invite all these kids? There are people here I've never seen before in my life. Fresh blood, he explained absently, making his way to the stairs. The place was so crowded that he was never going to be able to spot Dee Dee unless he gained some altitude. I followed him up the first few steps. Fresh blood is one thing, I argued, but these guys could trash your house and not even have to look you in the eye on Monday morning. Talk to the wall. He was 100% gone from me. I followed his gaze and spotted Dee Dee talking with some of the girls' volleyball team. Then she noticed him too. Their eyes locked, and I swear the lights dimmed for a moment from the power surge. They began to move toward each other. They were separated by 30 feet, tops. But a good 4 dozen revelers occupied the space between them. I don't think Jake and Dee Dee noticed. In their minds, they were the only two people in this jammed party house and quite possibly the entire planet. Dee Dee didn't look to me like she was playing weekend golf. This was the lawyering of the highest order, an appearance before the Supreme Court. As I watched them come together, I had a sense of 2 soldiers crossing an active battlefield to meet in the middle. Dancers gyrated, drinks spilled, play fighters traded shoves, heavy bass shook the air, and through it all, Jake and Dee Dee found each other on a Friday night in late September. They didn't fall into a soulful B-movie embrace. In fact, they didn't touch each other at all. But you'd have to be drunk, dense, or totally self-absorbed to not notice the magnetism between them. Todd was all 3, but even he managed to figure it out. His face reddening, his scowl thunderous, he waded through the mass of humanity to confront the meeting at the bottom of the stairs. He grabbed his girlfriend's arm. Let's go, Dee Dee. This party's boring. A cherry bomb went off in the dining room, and a moment later, the student council vice president leaped high above the sea of heads, his dreadlocks on fire. It was out in a second, beaten down by the flailing pocketbook. But that didn't stop someone from emptying the kitchen fire extinguisher in the guy's face. Light, fluffy foam blanketed the remnants of 17 pizzas. I'm not ready yet, Dee Dee told Todd. I want to stay. He looked more surprised than annoyed. How often did Todd Buckley hear the word no? Seriously, he said, let's get going. I'm having a good time, she insisted. Jake put his 2 cents in. I'll see that she gets home, baby. I bet you would, growled Todd. Okay, we're staying. And he stormed away. On the surface, it was a fairly innocent exchange, one that maybe a handful of people noticed over the music and craziness, but to this observer, the meaning was undeniable. Todd was vulnerable, and he knew it. Jennifer appeared at my elbow. You know what your problem is, Ricky? You don't know when to mind your own business. So Todd's a little bent out of shape. So what? I can't think of anyone who deserves it more than him. She was probably right about minding my own business part. Was my appointment book so empty that I had to stick my nose into other people's love lives to feel important? I was turning into Mrs. Appleford of Fitz. Was it revenge against Todd I was trying to savor, or what he'd done to me that day in the apple orchard? He'd stolen Jennifer, and justice required him to forfeit a girl too. If so, it was a pretty sour revenge, and I wasn't enjoying the spectacle of Todd getting burned. No, I was observing this the way you'd watch 2 out-of-control trains careening inevitably together with a mixture of fascination and dread. One thing was certain, I had never seen Todd a little bent out of shape. This was uncharted ground, so I kept an eye on him. For the next half hour or so, he did a tour of the party, checking in with old admirers to remind himself that he was still the man. Our first game was tomorrow, so it was a good night to rev up enthusiasm for the old snot and mustard. Todd had them bonking heads and biting sofa cushions to work up their hatred of liberty. Judging from the number of players around the keg, my teammates were also working up raging hangovers, which didn't bode well for game day. If Jake kept on having Friday night parties, the really smart move would be to put our money on our opponents all through the season. Jake should maybe have Saturday night parties instead, after the football game. Melissa was part of a group that had staked out the space under the kitchen table. There were 4 of them, a guy and 3 girls, smashing Ritz crackers with a ball-peen hammer. They had no purpose for the mounds of beige dust they were creating, yet they wore grimaces of intense concentration as if they were splitting the atom. When Todd found Melissa, I could almost see the light bulb flashing over his head. It wasn't a dance of seduction. He just reached under the table, grabbed her by the arm, and dragged her through the hall and up the stairs. He didn't care who saw them. In fact, he was probably counting on word getting back to Dee Dee. I don't know if he even thought about Nelson. I sure would have. The last time I'd seen Nelson, he was down in the basement trying to tackle the 500-gallon iron oil tank that stood next to the furnace. Todd was probably safe on that front. I watched them from the bottom of the stairs. Their previous 3-minute maulings had taken place in the bathrooms and closets, but Todd meant business this time. He hustled her straight into a spare bedroom and slammed the door. I looked for Dee Dee and Jake, but they were gone too. It hadn't been much of a fun evening anyway, but that was the moment I stopped enjoying Jake's parties for good. All the madcap silliness just seems kind of brainless and hurtful. Jake was crazy if he thought it made sense to let 200 people, half of them total strangers, lay waste to his house. Dee Dee wasn't worth it. Nothing was. The front door burst open, and the party probably absorbed 7 more guests. Connor was there to high-five the newcomers, one of whom was the delivery man from 1-800-4-BAGELS. This invasion from Atlantica University. These girls go nuts for college guys, Connor bawled. "Just show them your student ID and you're golden." There was a blood-curdling scream from the basement, and a pack of Broncos burst up the stairs, faces shining with excitement and purpose. If they did it to the Liberty Defense what they did to the pastry guests as they bowled their way to the door, tomorrow was going to be a momentous day for Fitzgerald football. Kids were hitting the deck left and right and center, including a couple of the AU guys. I was bewildered until I saw the pair of jeans tucked under Kendrick's arm. And Dipsy was right on schedule, bare-legged and humiliated in his fluorescent blue underwear. I couldn't make out his exact words over the din, but since I'd heard them on 2 previous occasions, my mind easily filled in the blanks. "Come on, guys, give me back my pants." About 50 people rushed outdoors to watch the half-naked, pudgy Dipsy try to catch up to 4 athletes in peak physical condition. The Broncos all piled into an ancient convertible Chevy Malibu and started the unmuffled engine. Spearing Dipsy's jeans on the radio antenna, they pulled out into the street and began to inch along, the pant legs flapping like 2 flags on a diplomatic limousine. They rolled just slowly enough to keep poor Dipsy in the chase. He puffed along behind them, yelling, "Come on, guys!" at levels of increasing exhaustion. Someone winged a half-eaten s'mores at him, missing his phallic cowlick by inches. The spectators were on the grass, rollicking with mirth. Some of them were laughing so hard that tears streamed down their cheeks. It was, I admit, one of the more hilarious sights I'd ever witnessed. And yet, I didn't even crack a smile. So Rick is starting to change a little bit, we're seeing, and he's starting to realize how childish and stupid teenagers can be. Not you guys, but maybe some of your peers. That's it for today.